So I hope you'll please join me in welcoming the following folks. Stacy Bohr, who is Senior Vice President of Sales at Crisp, as well as Tony Miller, CPG Business Line Leader at Crisp, and John Shore, Managing Director of Commerce at Omnicom Media Group. Welcome, folks.
All right, should we start with introductions before we dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
John, who are you?
I'm John Shore. I'm the Commerce Lead for the Center of Excellence at OMG.
What's your middle name?
Which is the only question I said I don't want to answer. So I feel like I was thinking about this the other day, and I think I started in shopper marketing when I was 16. My first job was at Kmart. And yes, I announced blue light specials in the store. Half of you probably don't know what those are. I'm aging myself, but it was basically a blue light that would flash, and it was like, a flash sale in the store. So yeah, I've been in retail for a while, I guess.
Welcome. Hi, Tony.
Hello. So I'm Tony Miller, Business Line Leader at Crisp. I come from a background of category management at CPGs. I was at Schwann's most recently on the Target desk as category captain in frozen foods. Before that, I did my Minnesotan rite of passage and spent time working at Target, both in the stores and in merchandising.
Awesome. So glad you're both here. So today we're going to talk about supply chain data. And this is a newer and older, which we'll get to, data set, frankly. But before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about who Crisp is. Crisp is a company that launched in 2020. You know this very well, John. You should actually be saying this. And Ari Trosdale, who founded Tapad, you may know Tapad from the space. I see a lot of nods. They sold that organization, and then he traveled the world, and he saw there was a food discrepancy between what was being produced and what was being consumed. He's like, what's going on? We need to solve this. We need to eliminate food waste. As a result, he started integrating with platforms that are at the retailers, which we'll talk about today, that he realized, and a light bulb went off and goes, oh my goodness, this is data that we've always wanted in marketing. Why have we not had access to this? And what he realized is it was a technological gap, not a desire or lack thereof. So we're going to dive into what that looks like and why Crisp launched as a result. But first, Tony, you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, so this is just kind of a visual of what we do at Crisp. So on the left-hand side is all of the different data sets that we are accessing and pulling and compiling the data. We then take it, we do some normalization, and then it depends on how it needs to be used. So we have some standardized dashboards for some of our customers that lean into that for sales results, to check velocity and distribution. And then we can pipe directly into a ton of different outputs, whether it be their cloud-based solution and integrating directly with advertisers and marketers.
Perfect. And for me, my whole background is in programmatic. I had no idea, frankly, no offense, what you were talking about before I got to Crisp. So the connectors that he's referring to, the portals, the integrations that we're having are the POS systems, the data that the sales, distribution, category managers are using every single day. But it's not making its way to the marketing world. And that's the technology that we're talking about and the impact we'll talk about today. So quickly, let's frame this up with a rhetorical story. So you can imagine we're all used to a campaign with a new product is launching. The product has begun shipping. You know your audience. You've already determined that. You've tested the creative. It's ready to go. And the customer is engaged. They're ready to buy it. But there's no inventory. And this doesn't just happen in supply chain crises like we're in now. This happens all the time. That's a poor customer experience. What would you do? I mean, if you have distribution across the country, now we're talking about thousands of different places that you're serving ads to drive people into that may or may not even have the inventory available. If you had store-level shelf data in real time, which Tony did at Schwann's, but we didn't on the marketing side, what would you do? And that's what we're here to talk about today. So John, with that, the pandemic was a crazy time. What was going on at Omnicom? What were some of the things that you saw there?
What wasn't going on? I would say at its most extreme, I guess at its worst, we did have some clients and brands completely pause media because of supply chain gaps and availability challenges. Just outright pause. And why was that? Because we didn't have the visibility into be supply chain metrics. There was no transparency around that. And so that was the worst case scenario.
So that's bad for the brand, is bad for the agency for sure, and it's just bad for business. So then what? Like,
Exactly.
What do you do?
We leverage Crisp.
Okay, exactly. All right, so what did you do? So what I think is so cool about this panel is we're talking about, frankly, siloed organizations. The CPG companies have all this data on one side of the house, on your side, your previous side, the sales and operations side. During the pandemic, what were you doing?
Yeah, I mean, it was working directly with the target buyer to help her put her strategy together on launching new items and seeing where we could lean in of what products are actually available at our brands and at other brands to make sure the shelves had something available. So at that point, it was whatever you could put on the shelf, you put it on the shelf. So finding store level, item level, sales and inventory data access was huge.
And you had that.
And I had that.
How often?
I could get at it anytime. It was ad hoc as necessary. I pulled it on a daily basis at times. I was updating reports weekly. It was pretty much though just me and then my sales counterpart on the Target team that had access to the Target portal and the Target data.
Did it ever, I'm not coming down on you, but did it ever dawn on you that perhaps your marketing counterparts could use that data?
I mean, it crossed my mind, but it came down to they would have never had direct access to it except for through me. And if that's another Excel report that I'm forced to update and modify and run every single week, there goes another 4 hours of my Monday morning, and there wasn't time for that. So that's part of what brought me to Crisp, honestly, was knowing that, A, not only did I have to do that every morning of scrambling to put my recaps together and doing that, but now I could help people where you could log in on a Monday and see what actually happened the last week, drill down to store level access and see what was going on, and be able to truly spend time putting recaps together rather than just reporting the news of what happened. You could drill into the whys because you had time to do that, to get it out to everyone who needed to see it by Monday morning, whatever time that was.
And this data is not syndicated. It's not scraped. This is just...
It is true one-to-one what item was sold in what store through the register, what items are available within the actual on-hands at the stores and at the distribution centers. So I could look and see, is my product out of stock at the store? Well, is it also out of stock at the distribution center where I know this went from a 1 week problem to a 2-3 week problem from an out of stocks perspective because I know there's no replenishment coming down the pipeline.
It's good data to have. So now we're starting to break down silos. And you heard about Crisp.
Yeah, I think, Stacy, we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary.
Time
flies. I was introduced to Crisp just, I think, August or September of last year. So it really is relatively new. But taking a step back, I would say as agencies, as marketers, we're under this enormous pressure to drive business outcomes, whether that's revenue, whether that's growth, whether that's category share or new customer acquisition. So I feel like the time is now. It's just so relevant to be having this discussion. And there's sort of some urgency here. I think, we believe we're on the eve of a recession. Discretionary spending is down, inflation is up, consumers are starting to trade down, and our brands and our clients are having to fiercely defend against private label products. So it's just a really interesting time, and there's pressure from all sides to elevate media performance and to drive these greater outcomes beyond the usual media metrics we've all been working with for years now.
Makes a lot of sense. And you just said something that made me want to ask Tony a question. Now I lost it in my head. What was it? What did you just say?
Well, what struck me yesterday? There was an interesting stat from the CMO of Kellogg's, and she had said over 54% of consumers actually go and research online and then buy in store. I mean, that's pretty staggering. I think that was really amazing. And I think that's sort of a testament to how critical it is to start using these other data signals to elevate media planning, strategy, activation.
And take me under the hood at the organization during the same sort of crises, inflation, et cetera. What's happening on the brand side?
Right. I think the retailers are seeing them go through SKU rationalization again.
Say that again?
SKU rationalization. So cutting the tail, right? you're leaning in on your best items. You're not having those tertiary end of the line items that are taking up space on shelves anymore, because you need the holding power out there. You need to have additional on hands of your top SKUs because the supply chain is difficult right now. It's taking more time for products to get to stores. So that being said, when a buyer trusts a new item and launches a new item, they want it to be successful almost as much, if not more, than the brand does, because they're putting their neck on the line saying, I believe in this product when we are in a SKU rationalization mode. I decided to lean into this new product. And within 8 weeks, if that product's not meeting velocity requirements, they're immediately thinking, well, where do I cut it? Do I bring somebody in to replace it? It's not going to be the conversation that you'd like to have where you're talking about increased distribution for that new item. So being able to do anything you can to drive up those velocities when that product is launched, and being able to do it specifically at store level locations when you know different retailers launch and do resets of their categories at different times. So you can't always align things from when it's in a marketplace nationwide.
That's so cool, because different regions or different stores have different goals for you to win more distribution. And on the marketing side, how are we supposed to figure out where to optimize and reallocate budget if we don't have transparency into the data that we're talking about? Yeah, cool. Nailed it. All right. John, we've heard and seen headlines around supply chain IQ score. Omnicom is putting a ton of resources into solving this problem. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're completely leaned in on this whole concept of connecting supply chain signals to media activation. And we have developed a whole suite of products and tools that essentially act as a connector to actually connect the supply chain intelligence that Crisp provides and other retailers to the actual day-to-day media activation. And that's across all various digital channels. And so it's really a tool, and that's all connected to Omni, our iOS, if you will, our campaign orchestration platform.
Cool. And the bottom line, the thesis is really stop serving ads where there's no inventory available, period, right?
You know what? Exactly. I think it's, at its heart, this is not complicated. And I think that is sort of one of the key takeaways is, let's not serve an impression where there is no availability. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that's new. And I think that's part of our evolution within commerce. And I think of, for those of you that are familiar with activating across the marketplaces, Amazon, for example, we have these insights. We pull inventory metrics almost daily from Vendor Central and Amazon, and we're making investment decisions, at the ASIN level, at the SKU level, based on those insights. So I see this as sort of kind of an extension of that sort of activation excellence that we have in the marketplaces like Amazon, and applying that to our D2C channels.
It's exciting. So how's it been going?
It's been going well. It's so interesting because I think, first of all, measurement is key, right? We all live and die by measurement. It's a blessing and a curse, right? And so we're doing a couple things. Well, this is a relatively new data source. For most retailers, Chris provides a 2-year look-back window, which is really compelling. So we're doing a couple of things with that 2 years of historical data. One, we're creating a demand engine, and that demand engine is essentially forecast modeling based on the actual sales data to inform higher level, more upstream media planning, investment planning across channels. And then we're also looking at it from a sales velocity perspective. So looking back over that 2-year period and kind of analyzing sales velocity overlaid with pricing and promos and offers and things like that to help inform promo and offer strategy for the upcoming season or cycle.
It's a game changer.
Yeah, it really is. So it has, of course, the sort of media efficiency use cases, but it also helps inform planning.
That's exciting. And on the measurement side, to actually say, this is the result of our media in market, this is the actual lift from the actual sales, is a big upgrade.
Exactly. And another example is we're currently piloting leveraging this data for a CPG client that we have that has a new product launch this summer. And of course, as we all know, with the new product launches, there's limited availability. So we're able to sort of laser focus on those DMAs in areas where we know that we're driving sales velocity. And I'm sure Tony has a perspective on why that's so important for a new product launch.
Right, and it's usually you have goals for what you want to hit from a velocity standpoint from the buyer, and those are going to be heavily monitored. Those new items, you're talking every single week. You have a list of here are the new items. How are they holding up against their peers? How are they hitting with the goals that the brands promised them that they were going to hit from a velocity perspective? And they'll look at them down to the store cluster, which is essentially all of the stores that have the same assortment. Looking at down to that level, because everything right now is so customized down to one store might have its own assortment because that is the core demographic and customer you're looking at, where they will look at it that closely down to that level.
And I think that's where the value is, and that's what makes this so much more compelling against modeled data, paneled data, or scraped data.
Mic drop. Well, really, Tony, hearing all this is kind of, I said to Tony earlier, I was like, welcome to our world, because he comes so much from the CPG and retail side that I'm like, this is the world of marketing. Any surprises as you hear what John's saying? How do you think this will change the relationship between the two, frankly, silos at the CPG organization?
I mean, I don't know if there's any salesperson at the brand or buyer out there who wouldn't want to be doing this, because it's going to drive sales. It's going to drive sales, and it's also going to be more efficient on their spend on that side, where you can look at it and actually be able to see those results that you're talking about. If you want to test something in a region and be hyper focused on it down to the zip code to promote it, you can do that. If I suddenly had levers to pull, if I knew my inventory was heavy or my inventory was light, to adjust and increase ad spend, it's huge. You can get ahead of it before you're then having a conversation about how do we replace this SKU with something else. It can be like, hey, here's the differences that were made as we use this technology to adjust our campaign, and now we are not just in line, but we are above our velocity requirements that we have.
So, not to beat a dead horse, but how did you do it before? And what did that conversation look like between you and the marketing team when there was a high pressure scenario where you had to keep product on the shelves?
It was all between the sales team and the buyer at the store, and all on trade spend, right? So it was all just about what can I leverage from that level of having to promote it just in store. Do I run a temporary price cut? And if I don't have an end cap for that product to be on, is a temporary price cut going to actually do anything? So that's where having that additional measure to get eyes on that product, whether it's a new launch or whether it's something where it's heavy in a region and you want to sell through, or if it's the other way around where you want to maybe focus on a product that you do know you have in inventory, that's huge, because it's tough to make those changes for your print ads and things like that.
Do you agree with the following statement? I said earlier that this is a technological gap, not a gap in desire to share the data across the organizations. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's data that's been there for years, but it's been in its silo on the sales and category side, where it surprised me of how little even the internal supply chain and productions teams didn't use this data to dig into it. Anywhere you can kind of break down those silos, but make it a spot where it is easy to access for everyone who needs to use it and can have value from it, that's kind of the key. Because if you still have the one person who has access to it, who's relied to be the one pulling the data and generating those reports, they just don't have the time or energy to do that.
And especially for CPGs, because in my mind, there's a lack of first-party data. And in marketing, that's king. You want your customers. And knowing that this exists, I had the same experience as Ari, our founder, which was like, what? This is right there and we're not using it. Has it been...
Well, and I think that's the transformation that we're seeing. We're now having conversations with salespeople, channel people, category teams that we never had exposure to before, because historically they don't talk to marketing or they don't talk to brand. And so that's been really interesting.
And certainly not the agency.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But this idea of being able to leverage this data in marketing to drive sales is absolutely something that is kind of new between teams client side and in these larger organizations.
Yeah, it's a process too. It's an evolution. Before we wrap up, anything that we didn't say that you think should be said?
Where do we start? So I actually think, if I were to think about the future of supply chain and like, what does that mean for marketers? What does that mean for all of us? We've seen supply chain in the headlines. Consumers who didn't know what supply chain was 2 years ago now know what it is. And it's just part of our, vernacular now. But what does it mean from a marketing perspective? And I really think that supply chain and availability, product availability, will become a standardized media metric. So think of brand safety, viewability, ad fraud, all of those things that we're really focused on from a digital perspective. I think that, long-term in the future, product availability will be one of those standardized metrics. And, I think about, we've been talking about personalization for years now. We've been talking about driving frictionless consumer experiences. Haven't totally solved for either, but we do talk a lot about both of those things. I think this is an extension of that. Why fundamentally would you serve an ad to somebody where a product is not available? So, I think we're just sort of extending that excellence across the board.
It's really about doubling down where there is, not taking away.
Yeah.
Budget, for example. Like what we're seeing is people are reallocating in programmatic bidding higher to win the impression that matters rather than just blanketing areas.
Totally. Exactly. The other thing I would say that gets me excited is this, we're starting to sort of see this convergence of programmatic with in-store and shopper marketing activations. So I think about our partnership with like a Place IQ, where we can then programmatically buy in-store digital media, such as cooler screens or grocery TV. And that's really exciting to me, because then when we think about, I think there could be a workshop about programmatic shopper, completely separate of this, but I think about connecting the supply chain intelligence with those in-store creative executions that we can buy programmatically. And that gets really exciting.
Fast. Great. Well, let's wrap it up with 3 key takeaways. I thought we should each take one, but I'll take them all because that's where we landed. Number 1, take supply chain data into account when planning product launches and evergreen campaigns. That speaks to your point, John, about this is an always on strategy, period. You want ads to be viewable. You also want to serve ads where there's product available. 2, use real-time data. This is huge. Break down those silos. If I had my dream today, it would be to empower all marketers to ask their sales team to get their hands on this important data set. And 3, to evaluate campaign performance based on actual POS data. Actually understand how you did, not just in the context of your online KPIs, but what really matters, which is the bottom line. So with that, we will open it up for questions. Thank you, everyone.
So that was a great presentation, great information. Definitely my favorite presentation so far at the conference.
Wow.
He's a little biased.
Can you talk a little bit more about the platform and what I saw as Crisp is the connector and the dashboard itself, and maybe some of the metrics that are served in the dashboard that, let's think of a media or a marketing person that will be exposed to that maybe they necessarily don't see as much when we're talking about supply chain, product availability, inventory, those kinds of things.
Yeah. So the dashboards we have one built for sales to specifically see your sales history. How are you trending versus prior years? But the thing that I love about our dashboard is I can make 3 clicks and now I can see where my top sales stores are for one product in one state or one zip code. It is very much, you don't have to know exactly what you're looking for when you first come into the platform and can easily find your way through it. Personally, I lean on velocity for everything. That is, to me, the number 1 metric that you would want to look at when you're talking sales information. If you're ever going to have a conversation with a buyer or a brand of how a product is truly performing, it is velocity. The next thing behind that is on-shelf availability. So what do you have from inventory perspective of being able to see store level, item level, detailed inventory information of what's on hand, as well as seeing, like I said earlier, what's actually on hand in the distribution centers that power those stores. Because it's two different problems. If I'm looking at a store's out, but the DCs all have full inventory levels, I know that inventory is coming. If those DCs are empty as well, I know that we are going to be dealing with probably 2, maybe 3 weeks of no on-shelf availability for those products, because it has to go from, if I'm the brand, from my distribution center to the store's distribution centers, get worked out there, and then get worked to the stores. And then the thing we're seeing that's unique to these times right now is it's taking an additional day, if not 2, to work its way from the back room of the stores to the actual shelves. So being able to stay ahead of that kind of stuff is key, and it's all kind of there at your fingertips where you can dive in. The beauty of it is you don't have to be the one who traditionally had the credentials to Target, to Walmart, to any of those, because you can come into Crisp and have that because it's already been pulled and automated.
But also an important thing to add is we don't want to create another silo either. So there's the platform, which Tony was just talking about, but then you can see on the right, the goal is to pipe this into all parts of the organization, so there are no silos. And the data is the connective tissue that enables collaboration and the ability to solve these problems.
Right. If they already, and that's the thing is, if our customers already have their own reporting that's built in Power BI, cool, we'll connect to that, and it's automated, it's refreshed, they don't have to ever spend time pulling the data from the platform ever again. If they want it in Snowflake because that's what they want, it's there. So it's very open, and we're, we grow with our brands as they kind of change their tech stack and level themselves up with how they're dealing with data.
Okay, I found this very relevant to a future problem that I might have with the new product launching. So we're told, or we're under the thinking that we shouldn't turn on media or really heavy spend TV until we get 60% ACV. But if I get a Target end cap 2 months before that, like what media are you recommending that? Like I'd like to do something with Target still support, get that velocity so it looks good in the first 8 weeks, like you said. Am I doing just Rundell things, or am I doing other, like what are you doing then in those periods where you are being specific? What kind of media is in that channel then?
So what kind of media are we activating to support a new product launch?
Or when you, and it's a Target, you have like, is it still the thinking that you don't turn on big heavy investment until you have the 60% ACV, or now that you have this visibility and you're going to be in Target, would you recommend it differently?
You know what? It varies client to client and brand to brand based on their individual goals. That's what I would say to that. As far as channels go, for using the new product launch I have for a beverage product this summer, it's actually a lot of OLV and CTV that we're doing, which is really interesting because we're going to be able to start correlating measurement and impact of those CTV ads against actual sales and sales velocity within those DMAs. So that's really interesting. But I would say, this is applicable to all D2C channels and feeds into the overall media plan. So whether that be search, whether that be social, email, programmatic, it's applicable to all of them.
And I'd add Crisp was born working with emerging brands that were super nimble, that had fewer silos, and they used our data as kind of a roadmap to their marketing. So the second it was on the shelves, they wanted to see the velocity and the sales, and they doubled down to earn more distribution. So I'd say we see that it's very graceful, very important to double down at launch to earn the distribution afterwards.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hey, so this might be more a question for you, John, but it's obviously related to what you're getting from the Crisp platform. And I think it goes into product lifecycle. And I guess I'm curious, how are you making decisions around like media investment, pause, stop, not just for like that loss, that waste mitigation when you are purely out of stock? How do you take into account the incrementality of the next dollar spent or the marginal return of that? Is that There must be a sliding scale. Maybe I'm taking too literally, like pause when we're out of stock.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say we are, of course, it's not just media efficiency. Well, I guess this is media efficiency. It's not just pausing media for out of stock, right? Although that's the big obvious one, and that's the main use case. But it's also throttling media, or I'm sorry, not throttling media, but heavying up on media when there is overstock. And we've seen some overstock issues now. It's also been in the news where we're not pushing those products quick enough, and that becomes problematic. So we're also leveraging this from that perspective. There's so much that we're working on around measurement right now, and we're still solving for a lot of those things that you brought up. I feel like we've just hit the tip of the iceberg because it is a new data source, and I think probably within the last 4 months.
Yeah, I'll give one shout out that there are some retailers, and it varies depending on the data set based on what retailer we're talking about, that will give you expiration dates. So you'll know my product's going to expire. I'm going to heavy up because I want to eliminate food waste, which is dear to our heart, but we love that one as well. There's tons of use cases we could explore.
Thanks. When I grew up, I wanted to be a politician, so I have a question for both our media and our messaging guys. We'll start with media, though. I like what you said about product availability becoming like a key marketing metric, but you work at a media company, so I'm curious how you talk about the value and the stuff you said about integrating with in-store. I mean, a treasure trove of like if you can start converting that into media. Is that a part of the brand conversations?
Yes, absolutely. So it's interesting, this whole evolution, and I'm speaking from an agency perspective. Conversations have evolved so greatly. Before it was just really strictly focused on media campaigns, and now increasingly brands and clients are leaning on us to do full breadth of consulting across the commerce spectrum and really providing end-to-end holistic solutions. And it's just an expectation now. So we're having to evolve really quickly. But yes, we're having those conversations with clients who are very interested in connecting, obviously online to offline, which we've been talking about forever. But now we actually have a vehicle to do it. I mean, we can actually, it's real. It's not just talk. It's not just theater, but we have a way to programmatically buy in-store digital activations and now connect that, and all the creative possibilities with product availability in store. And I think of, cool things like, being physically close to a competitor product, or time of day, seasonality. Are we pushing, frozen breakfast products and Eggos in the morning, or on a hot day, is it, cold case products, things like that. And also new product launches, really targeting those stores where there is availability and driving up that sales velocity to earn increased distribution. So I think the sky's the limit. And, again, I feel like dipping our toe, so to speak. We're just on the cusp of all these great things. So if anybody wants to test, come talk to me after.
Very cool. And onto our messaging friends, I love the space that you're in. I think SMB is like perfect for messaging. I'm curious what the messaging experience looks like. And I'm working named accounts, but I don't know the Crisp solution that well. So
I think we should talk. Can you repeat the question around messaging?
Yeah, just from a shopper experience or consumer experience, what does that look like?
Oh, so here's what's interesting. Crisp is under the hood. It's sort of invisible, so it's not consumer facing. So I think of Crisp as yet another custom data source that I'm importing into my Omni platform to make optimization decisions. So when I had mentioned like creative messaging, I'm going to make a creative decision, or it's going to help inform creative execution based on what I know about the product in that store, as an example. And then, we have things about, well, how do we scale that, and how do we really automate that so that we can, scale more rapidly. So those are the things that we're thinking about.
Totally.
But, they're the treasure trove of data that's informing the creative,
Sure.
the messaging, the bid optimization, and all of those things.
Exactly.
All right. Stacy, Tony, John, terrific job. We We appreciate having you guys
Thank
here.
you.
I assume you'll be hanging out for a little bit in case there are more questions.
Yeah.
For sure.
Great. I'm hearing some stomachs start to rumble. So I want to thank Crisp and our guests today for joining us.
Thank you.